Hello, listeners, and welcome to Elisha's Eerie History.
Elisha's Eerie History.
Hello, listeners. I am Elisha, and today I have special guest and star Arlo. Arlo is a friend of mine, a friend of the pod. Arlo is from the region of Virginia that today's episode is about, so hopefully they can bring us their personal takes on all the tea happening. Without further ado, Arlo!
Thank you.
Do you want to let them know anything about you? Do you have anything you want them to know?
Well, Elisha and I have been friends for a good amount of years now.
Couple years now.
Yeah, Elisha has visited my hometown, which we'll talk about.
Yes.
We'll get into the hillbilly of it all.
Yeah.
I mean, that's about all.
Perfect. Yeah, I'm excited. We are going to get into the hillbilly of it all. Without further ado, I'm going to get into today's topic, which is Hurricane Camille. So, Hurricane Camille is a Category 5 hurricane that on July 15th, 1969, came up the Gulf of Mexico into Mississippi and Louisiana, and then traveled north into Virginia. It was one of 3 Category 5 hurricanes ever to hit the United States. The hurricane experienced winds of over 200 miles per hour, and it dropped 27 inches of rain in Virginia, killing a total of 153 people, causing $116 million in damages.
Yeah. I don't know if you're gonna mention this. I don't know if it's even publicized or written anywhere, but I had a teacher in Nelson County tell us that there was a theory that, I don't know if you know Creedence Clearwater Revival's Bad Moon Rising.
Okay, no.
Came out in the same year.
Okay.
There was a theory it was about the same, like it was about Camille.
Is it a movie?
It's a song.
Oh, it's a song.
It's a hippie song.
Cute. It probably is.
It's a it's a famous hippie song.
I actually think I saw this song in my research, maybe.
Okay.
Maybe not, though. Well,
Okay.
we can listen to it later.
My bad.
You might be asking me, Elijah, why are we talking about a hurricane in Virginia? Oh my god, I'm so glad you asked. So, as Arlo knows, Camille, when it went up into Virginia, it actually sat over Central Virginia. The location, which we haven't said yet, I don't believe, is Nelson County. Yay. Arlo's like, Arlo and I are actually from a similar part of Virginia. We're from like central southwest Virginia.
Mm-hmm. Right up 29, which didn't exist at the time, but
Yeah, to talk a little bit about the geography there and why Camille stayed there is it is east of the Blue Ridge Mountains, I believe. No, west. No, east. Well, kind of both.
my knowledge of Virginia geography is shameful.
That's
I forget.
okay.
I know of all the towns, I know of all the locations, but my brain rearranges them.
That's okay.
Like Fairfax, I know now it's in Nova. However,
Well,
I forget.
yeah, there's like a Halifax in Southern Virginia
Yeah.
too, so the names are similar. Regardless to say, the Blue Ridge Mountains cut in between Nelson County.
Yes.
And because of that, it takes storms a while to move out of the area.
Mm-hmm.
And because of that, this hurricane grew to be as big as it was.
Yes.
But before we get in there, we always like to do a little we talk about the reviews of the location.
Oh, yes.
Now, I chose to do the Nelson County Historical Society.
Lovely.
Yeah.
I've been there.
Have you been there?
Yes, in high
is
school.
Was it fabulous?
Yeah, it was pretty nice. I don't remember. I mean, it's high school.
It's a while
I
ago.
wasn't a person yet, but
Right.
but the tour guide was lovely. Same person who talked about the CCR song
Okay,
was
cool.
there, kind of like talking with the tour guide. But yeah, they gave us a pretty. Like, they have a pretty in-depth exhibit on Hurricane Camille there.
Right.
If I remember correctly, which, who knows?
Yeah, well, once we see the reviews, maybe they'll just give more light, but I think it might have gotten smaller or changed since then. But yes, they are the go-to resource on Hurricane Camille.
Yes.
Let's get into the
Yeah, let's
reviews. So they have a 4.6 out of 5 stars. Good job, Nelson County Historical Society.
Promising.
I have 3 reviews here. The first one is from 4 years ago by Tim Weber. Do you know Tim Weber, your fellow Nelson Countier?
You think we all know each other?
No. I'm just hoping you know someone. Well, you're going to know people later that we talk about.
What?
Well, you said you heard the names.
Okay. Well, okay, we do recognize each other by last name, and like the typical thing is like if you're talking about a classmate when you're young in Nelson, it's the question your parents will ask is like, well, who's their daddy?
Okay.
And that's how they ask like the family they're a part of.
Because you know the big families.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's like you know.
We're going to say Shiflets?
Yeah.
Yeah. So on episode 2, the Pocusson Mission,
Yeah.
I cut out every reference to Shiflet because they weren't involved in the mission. But if
I
you're
censored myself.
yeah, if you're from Central Virginia, you know that like Shiflets are like a huge family here.
Shiflets and my family go way back.
Really?
Yeah, we're all good friends.
That's another episode, guys.
Okay. But yeah, like you always ask the last name and then which ones. So
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah. Oh.
We'll see if I know any of them.
Okay. Well, Tim Weber from 4 years ago says, wonderfully informative exhibits and incredibly friendly staff. There is an awful lot packed into a relatively small space here. The stories and photos documenting the Hurricane Camille disaster tell the human side of the tragedy. Have a look and a listen, ... You won't be disappointed. Second review is by Jay Beard. This is from a year ago. He said, I wanted more information on Hurricane Camille, and this is the go-to place, in quotation marks, for the history of that devastating storm. So this is from a year ago, which makes me feel like
Maybe they should fund it.
the exhibit changed. Is it not funded?
I don't know.
Well-
that was an uneducated thing that I said.
I listened to a podcast where someone interviewed some survivors of Hurricane Camille, and it was last year, and they did it at the Nelson County Historical Society.
Yeah.
Anyways, next review by Pat Paris. This is also from 4 years ago. They said, the Society works very hard to provide the very best and historical information and artifacts in a format that everyone can enjoy. Nelson County Historical Society fights tirelessly to preserve our Nelson County heritage. Well done. And I want to set this as like the mood for who Nelson County is as a culture. This kind of spoke it all to me. Like, I feel like you guys really support each other for the most part. Maybe not, but from what I've experienced from Nelson County people is like they're like rural people that have more sense of like
Community.
struggle together
Yeah.
versus like other places. Where
Have
I'm
you-
from in Lynchburg, that's not the energy.
Have you been to any of our community centers?
I haven't. I've been to the farmer's market with you once.
Yes.
And I just remember, I don't know, I just remember how chill it was compared to the Charlottesville market.
It's my favorite one for
Yeah.
that reason.
Yeah. And also there's a lot of communes out there,
Yeah.
which gives it like a super like flower child vibe.
You do have to own land on the communes.
Oh, you do?
Yeah, I mean, you can have, like, you know, if you want to be there, you can have someone, like, you know, vouch for you. But, you know, if you want to live there, I mean, it's still ownership of land.
Right.
So that's common to communes in general, but
Okay.
yeah, it is something that, like, there is in Albemarle County as well. And there, I suppose, probably is in other parts of South Central Virginia,
Southwest Virginia.
Southwest.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't remember any communes being in Lynchburg. I might be ignorant.
I know there are around here, but I don't know about Lynchburg.
Yeah. Well, I just feel like Lynchburg
Mega churches, yes.
I was going to say, we were more of like a religious community, so the vibe... Because Nelson isn't like a religious community to me.
Yeah, not entirely. There are certainly religious groups. I would even say that the majority are religious, or are Christian, but yeah, there are just like different divisions of that.
Yeah.
And then you have your non-denominational and Catholic and like different groups instead of like more of the evangelical kind of. There are fewer kind of like evangelical churches out there.
Totally.
You have to kind of go out of the county for that kind of thing for the most part.
Yeah, it's more like rural churches.
Or did, at least when I was growing up.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Yeah. Arlo doesn't live there anymore, so please don't take what they say as the Nelson County truth.
It's not the gospel truth.
But they're talking from previous experience.
Yes.
Okay.
I am one person.
So I have so many resources from this. I'm just going to post all the sources this time instead of saying them all because we'll literally be here for half an hour and I'm not stealing nobody's thunder. So y'all read the description. I write them for you. None of y'all read them.
Yeah, you don't even hide them in like a document. You put it right there.
Yeah, because I don't want to get sued and I don't know the rules.
That's great.
Yeah, well...
That's better. Like, you're not hiding anything. That's perfect.
Yeah, I'm not trying to hide anything and I'm trying to be investigative. So that's why I put, like, the brief little blurb and then I just put all the sources. I'll even put, like, the graphic art I stole on the internet. Like, not stole, but, like, common use or whatever.
Derived.
Okay. So let us begin. Let's kind of break down. Let's get sciencey for a second. Let's break down what makes a hurricane really, really bad, kind of bad, not so bad. And we are now on August 19th into August 20th when the hurricane sits over Nelson County. The Hurricane Camille is stretched from Fredericksburg, Virginia, all the way to West Virginia. And overnight, in about 6 hours, Nelson County received 27 inches of rainfall. There are 3 main factors that go into a hurricane. The first is our wind and rain ratios. So, are we having 200-mile gusts? Are we having 50-mile-per-hour gusts? Is it raining 50% of the maximum amount? Is it raining 80% of the maximum amount? That's the first thing that kind of determines the quality of a hurricane. Second, is the hurricane fast moving? Is it slow moving? And then third is storm surges / flooding. Storm surges / flooding make up for 9 out of 10 deaths in a hurricane typically. In our case, in Nelson County, rain was at 100%. The National Weather Service at the time reported that it was the probable maximum rainfall, which meteorologists compute to be theoretically possible, that came down on Nelson County that day.
Yeah, this is something I remember hearing about when I was really young, is the humidity and the rainfall.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you have something about this in your sources, but I was told by my mom that the humidity and rainfall was so great that people reported that livestock were drowning from breathing the air.
Really?
Yeah. And that's anecdotal.
Yeah.
Of course, secondary or tertiary source, but
yeah,
that's what was said.
A lot of what we're going to go into today is also about how, like, farmers suffered from all of this. Also, why this hurricane was so horrible is Nelson County is a series of waterways that connect to the James River. And because of this, when there was flooding, it couldn't escape. We were inland. And so it rapidly increased. We'll get into that experience, but that was the main cause of all the suffering. People went to bed that night not realizing how intense the storm was going to be. Mm-hmm. And then people in Lynchburg and in Charlottesville on either side of Nelson County woke up having no idea everything that had just occurred. So let's get into an example of what happened that night, and that'll open us up to understanding the experience more to then talk about what happened and adding personal anecdotes. So we're going to go over the story of Warren Raines. Have you heard this story?
Yeah.
Okay.
We read it when I was in high school.
Okay. Yeah, he's like the really popular person to give his take because he's one of the few residents that'll speak about it. A lot of the survivors don't want to speak about it because it was so traumatizing. Warren Raines was 14 when Hurricane Camille happened, and his family, he had 2 sisters, 2 brothers, so 5 children in total, and then a mom and a dad. And they lived in an area of Nelson County called the Davis Creek Massey's Mill area. Massey's Mill is where they lived, and they went to bed that night thinking, this is a normal storm. Nothing serious is gonna happen.
Yeah, it's like white noise.
Yeah, and if you live in this area, you know we have storms all the time, and it's never a big deal. So they go to bed, everything's fine, and then around 2 a.m. they get a call from their neighbor who lives farther down Massey's Mill, closer to the water. And they say, oh my gosh, our entire neighborhood is flooding. Our car is floating away. Can we please send our children with you? So, like, you guys need to get out of here if you can. Your car's not underwater. Warren and his family and this family get into a station wagon. 11 people in total. They try to start the car. Gives 2 different accounts. One account I read, he says they went like 20 yards and the car stopped. In another account, he says the car didn't start at all due to water damage. Either way, they did not get far. The families get out of the car, and at this point, the water has surged up to about 8 feet, is what he says. And it's just pouring buckets. Everyone starts going separate ways, trying to run up hills, trying to figure out how to escape. And eventually, he and all of his family, unfortunately, get separated. So at this point, Warren says the water keeps raising, and he finds himself holding on to a willow tree to stay safe. He holds onto the willow tree and stays there the rest of the night. So he's there until the morning. Meanwhile, he's avoiding, like, carnage that is floating around him. At one point, and this is a direct quote, he says, whole homes were floating by, and you were making sure you weren't going to run into it. The next morning, the water receded quickly, and he says, like, the water basically, like, more or less went to a normal state. It receded, like, 8 or 9 feet.
Probably just from erosion at that point.
Yeah.
Just everything's eroded.
Yeah. Going off of the eroded thing, it was later reported that, whatever my sources says, that it was like 1,000 years of erosion happened in like 6 hours. Mm-hmm. And so what happened was it rained so hard in 6 hours that the ground, instead of turning, like, being soil, turned into like wet cement. And we'll get into it later. There was a huge landslide. Mm-hmm. It ended up killing an entire family. Warren, after everything recedes, he's in shock, clearly. He's 14 years old. Mm-hmm. He wanders around and finds his brother. At first, he's so in shock, he doesn't realize it's his brother. And then when he realizes it's brother, they get together. They come around. They find a few more people. There's no electricity. There's no cops, firefighters. There's no resources at all because this is like rural Virginia. The 2 gentlemen, young men, and the people that survived waited out. They looked for other survivors. Unfortunately, Warren's family did not survive. He said that at the time, people comforted him by telling him they had been flown to Lynchburg General Hospital when that was not, in fact, the truth. He said that when I went to bed that night knowing that I hadn't seen or heard anything from anybody, that it was bad news. And he said, there's a reason why, for me, the biggest thing is, nature can really do some bad things. August 20th will be a day branded in our minds until we die. Something really upsetting about Warren's story, too, is his house actually survived for the most part. The second and third floor of his house were completely unscathed, and if his family had decided not to leave and stay in the home, they likely would have survived. So yeah, that is Warren's story. I know we're trying to be a comedy podcast, but this one is a little dark. A couple of episodes have been kind of dark. You've heard this before. What is your reaction?
Yeah, I mean, there are parts of that I've heard before, but they still hit, like, especially, losing an entire family, obviously, the fact that the house was all right for the most part.
Yeah.
I remember the details of that story, like, kind of describing the parts of the house that were still there in the book when we had kind of talked about it when I was younger in school. And the other thing that I think about is, like, Massey's Mill is a place I'm relatively familiar with. Like, it's a place kind of that you go through in Nelson, kind of between, I guess, more eastern Nelson and Amherst area. Again, please don't listen to me. I'm terrible at geography.
Yeah, it's like kind of near central Nelson.
Yeah.
Into like the next county over.
Yeah, like closer to Amherst, I believe.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, that's an area that's still very rural. That's still, like, at least in the 2010s, the last time I was really there a lot, it was still very, a lot of places in Nelson County are still, your neighbors are very far away from you. It's not like in a suburban or urban environment where you can see their house when you look out the window.
And that was a big thing of why this devastated communities was this community farther west is like, oh shit, we're getting our asses handed to us.
Yeah.
And like infrastructure in Nelson isn't the strongest. So by the time they were like, we have to warn, the next town over, it was like too late.
It was all back roads at the time too. There were no main highways.
Yeah. Even today, when I drive from Charlottesville to Lynchburg to see my family, which Nelson is the main part of the drive, I'm not on like a beautiful straight highway. I'm like literally winding through Virginia.
Yeah.
And it's gorgeous.
Yeah, it is.
But I remember times we've gone through there.
Oh, I've taken you on some back roads.
Yeah. I remember times we've gone through there and I have literally felt like we are in, like, the West Virginia mountains. And not to, like, compare our experiences to third world countries' experiences, but there are parts of America that have infrastructure comparable to less developed nations.
Yeah, I mean, it's isolated.
Right.
There's a great disparity.
And throwback to episode 2, the Pocusson Mission,
Exactly.
we go into how isolation shaped this impoverished community. And it's kind of crazy because the Pocusson Mission, we experienced people drowning and like there was a huge flood there and they live deep in the mountains, and it's like so similar what happened here, just on a huge scale.
Yeah, and I mean, even in recent times, there are people who live in places that are just like heated by only a wood stove. There are people who like can't make it to school in the snow because there are no state roads, there is nothing that is plowed, there is no accessible route. Like, there are like people still living in those mountains. It's just modern. Yeah, in the story, part of the biggest struggle I had with this story was hearing how the aftermath of the disaster was taken care of. So there was a lot of harrowing, beautiful moments, but there were also moments that really painted the picture of how horrible the situation was. So first, I'm going to discuss how many people died in the 3 major locations, and then we're going to talk about how we uncovered this number. So Massey's Mill, where Warren and his family was,
23 people died. In Huffman Hollow, which is an area predominantly of the Huffman family, but there were other families there too, about 50 people died. And then in Davis Creek, an unknown number of people died. The numbers vary based on sources, but in total, people say about 130 to 150 people died. It's hard to say exactly how many people died because there could have been people driving through the area that didn't live there. That there were some bodies that were never identified that were near the road. So with all of that being said, after the hurricane, bridges were blown out. Roads were blown out. There was no way to enter into Nelson County from Lynchburg or Charlottesville other than tiny back road arteries. And because of that, rescue operations were really difficult. In typical natural disaster operations, you are allocated 30 days to recover people, and after that, it's considered like no good. Keep in mind, Mississippi also just got hit with this disaster storm, so the National Guard is down there. A lot of things are happening down there, and then all of a sudden, this happens in rural Virginia, unexpectedly, in inland Virginia, not even the coast. And the people of Nelson can't even inform other people what's going on. And so what ends up happening is a group of Nelson County officials, including the sheriff and some other people that survived, grouped with outside resources such as volunteers from the Lynchburg Police Station, people in the National Guard, all sorts of different organizations, the Mennonites, the Red Cross, all came together and was led by the locals and started a recovery process. In this recovery process, people were not recovered until 7 or 8 days after the storm in some circumstances, particularly at Huffman Hollow, where over 50 people died. They were not recovered until August 28th, which is 8 days after the incident. And the reason for this was, other than like having lack of resources going in, the locals of Nelson County were the only people who had the knowledge to identify where communities were. Yeah. So later in the recovery process, 2 days in, we had people from the military and the Navy and Marines come in from Quantico, and they fly helicopters around, which is awesome. It's like one of those moments where you're like, we're a military society, but like at least it was used for good, kind of, in this instance. All these helicopters are coming and rescuing people, but they had Nelson County residents in the helicopters directing them to where these communities, because they were so small and hidden in the mountains, it was like critical. Yeah. I want to read this article. It's from the Lebanon News, and it's called In Disaster Area. It says, rescuers were donned gas masks today to repulse the stench of death hanging over Virginia's disaster-stricken mountains. It was exactly 1 week ago today that dying Hurricane Camille poured more than 10 inches of rain on western and central Virginia, touching off landslides and floods that swept away entire mountain villages. The toll from Virginia's worst disaster ever stood today at 83 known dead, 104 people missing, and more than $100 million in damages. So people who worked it, some of them were Vietnam veterans, and compared it to the carnage of Vietnam. It was apparently very traumatizing for people because they would come up to an area where there were no survivors, and there were like 50 or so dead bodies or more. And this particular family, the Hoffman family, there was only one survivor of the Hoffman family, and it was because he was actually working at the time of the hurricane, and he survived. His whole entire family did not. So that's one instance where it's like really cruel to hear that like people's bodies were so decomposed.
Yeah. It's the middle of August too.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And yeah, this is of course just a unfortunate, I guess, not efficient rescue operation.
Not the most efficient.
Not the most efficient.
But that's
because of the circumstances.
I was going to say, it's because geographically it was almost geographically,
because of the area.
Yeah, in my research, it was saying that, like, even if you even before the landslide and disaster, Nelson County was a Jeep area where you basically had to have a Jeep to get to your house.
4-wheel drive.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have delivered pizzas around Nelson County. If you're making a turn, sometimes you're lucky and you can see, like, somebody's mailbox or some indication of, like, a driveway or of a house.
Right.
But in rural areas, a lot of times there's just literally a dirt path.
Right.
Like, it's still hard to tell. But what I mean to say is, like, even in the 2000s, like, we still have, like, if you compare this to, say, Hurricane Katrina, I mean, if you think of Hurricane Camille as more of a geologically created disaster in terms of the reaction to it, I mean, just comparing it to that, I would consider that to be more of a man-made failure. With Camille, the National Guard is there.
Oh, I hear what you're saying. Katrina, a lot of people after Katrina were saying no one was helping us.
People were stopped from helping them.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Where in Camille, they're having residents of the area help them in the helicopters.
Yeah.
Whereas, yeah. It's interesting to me that, 40 years before, 30 put more of an effort towards it, I guess.
Yeah, well, after Camille, the response from Virginia and from the country was amazing. One of the news stories I read, in Richmond, people were donating their unused cars to the residents of Nelson County. Post the disaster, residents were given trailer homes for 90 days, which isn't really that long of a time, but they were given trailer homes to live in temporarily. Secondarily, a huge Mennonite church community came in and helped A, build a church, B, offer funerals to all the families, and C, helped people in Massey's Mill and Davis Creek and Hoffman Hollow, all the places that experienced the floods, helped them recoup. There was a VDOT organizer that said at one point he believes 50% of the Virginia Department of Transport equipment and supplies and vehicles were all in Nelson County helping to restore the county. Also, because of Hurricane Camille, the U.S. Congress passed the Disaster Relief Act of 1969 in direct response to Hurricane Camille. And basically what this act does is it allows the president to shift resources to help natural disasters. So one of the issues Hurricane Camille and Nelson County faced was when all this happened, there was not a lot the government could immediately technically do. And it took 1 or 2 days for them to get these helicopters there instead of 30 minutes later like they would now. Especially because Nelson County, as it's in Virginia, is really close to a lot of military bases that do have the equipment to help out. Other things that happened where there is a landmark commissioned near Woodmill in Nelson County memorializing the tragedy. There have been multiple books written, one called Torn Land, one called The Roar of the Heavens, multiple interviews, multiple documentaries. So another instance was the Red Cross gave a man and his horse an award because the man the horse saved his mother from drowning. The man's name was Emery Fitzgerald.
Oh, I feel like that's awakening a really old memory. But that is lovely.
And it was really cool to hear all the interviews about it because you could tell, first of all, everyone was talking with an accent. I had a hard time understanding.
If you're on TV, you the ones they put on TV, the ones they interview have the thickest accent. They do not put you on TV unless you have the thickest accent.
Yeah, so these people had such thick accents and they'd be like, well, yeah, we got on the helicopters and we saved the town. The aftermath of it, too, Nelson County actually suffered economically 2 of the major employers in Nelson County left after Hurricane Camille. I'm a bad researcher. I don't know what those employers were. Those employers left, and because of that, Nelson County residents had to find jobs in Lynchburg and Charlottesville. When interviewed about this, Sheriff William Whitehead said, people have left in regards to find employment, but people want to live and stay in Nelson County.
I guess it hits a little different with, like, for me, I do recognize the last names.
Yeah.
Like, in a lot of these, like you said at the beginning, but, like, almost all of the probably all of the people mentioned, like, their descendants are people I've known.
Yeah.
And so, like, that kind of trauma lives in Nelson County.
In a community. I want to go to the Oak Hill Cemetery where most of the people that passed died. I want to go there for our B-roll for this one.
Oh, okay.
Thank you for coming, Arlo. Mm-hmm. I feel like I chatted it way too much, but you had some great insights. Thank you for joining us. Hopefully you could be on the next one, future ones. If you're into it. If you didn't like it, don't tell me.
No, this is fun.
Good.
This topic is not fun, but
yeah,
it's interesting to talk about it with you.
This one and episode 2, which was low-key similar to this, the Pocuston Mission.
Yeah.
Both episodes, researching it and, like, editing it and stuff, and, like, telling the story and stuff, it's not like a ha-ha, it's like
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, I guess, like, accustomed to it, again, like, a lot of these stories, like, some of these things I've been hearing since I was, like, old enough to hear them.
Yeah.
But, so, like, it doesn't hit as hard as it might have then. But, yeah, it still is very sobering, I suppose.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Well, when you understand a little bit more when you're older, it definitely makes it a lot harder to swallow.
Yeah.
Last question of the pod. On a scale of 1 to 10 E's, 1 being not very scary, 10 being I'm so scared, girl. How many E's do you give Hurricane Camille?
Oh, God. Mother Nature. I'm gonna give mommy 10 E's.
I give her 10 E's too. This,
like, I'm scared.
Yeah, 153 people dying.
Yeah.
More people died in Virginia than in Mississippi, where the hurricane touched land initially.
Didn't they say that was like a 1 in 10,000 year storm?
Yeah, they said the probability of it was like 10,000 years.
Yeah.
And
Mother Nature is scary.
Yeah.
That's what I'm really scared of.
Yeah, nothing to fuck around with.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you, Arlo, and thank you for tuning in to Elisha's Eerie History.